Wait, is that not my landlady?
A man who paid rent faithfully every month saw his landlady on the roadside, dressed in rags, begging strangers for coins. He almost did not recognize her, because this same woman owned houses scattered across 3 streets. But what he did not know was darker than poverty. Every coin dropped into her bowl was about to buy someone else's downfall. What was Madame Fadeki really collecting from the people who pitied her? And what would it cost the man who discovered the truth? Sit back, relax, and let's dive into this story. Dear lovely viewers, welcome to Tales by Summy, where I tell amazing stories that will keep you at the edge of your seat. Please support us by subscribing and turning on the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Now, let us begin. The town of Origbo woke up slowly every morning. Roosters called out first. Then the smell of akara frying drifted through the narrow streets. Then finally, one by one, doors opened and people stepped out to start their day. Tayo Fashina was already awake before all of that. He sat on the edge of his narrow bed, inside a small room at number 14, Balogun Street, adjusting the strap of his tool bag. He was a generator technician, not a big one, not the kind with a signboard and an office. Just a young man who moved from house to house, fixing what he could, charging what people could afford. His room was small. The walls had not been painted in years. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, and even that one flickered when the current came at all. But it was his. He had signed the tenancy agreement himself, 2 years ago, with his own hard-earned money, and the person who owned that house, along with several others on that same street, and 2 more streets beyond it, was a woman everyone in Origbo called Madame Fadeke. Madame Fadeke Bankole was not young. She was not old either. She moved somewhere in between, the kind of age where nobody dared to ask directly. She wore lace and expensive wrappers to church every Sunday. She drove nowhere herself, but a car always came for her, driven by a quiet young man named Ganyu, who never smiled and never answered questions. Everybody in Origbo respected Madame Fadeke. Some feared her. She was strict about her rent. She never gave extensions. She never explained where her money came from, and nobody was brave enough to ask. How many houses does that woman have again? Tayo's friend Wale asked one afternoon, as both of them sat outside sharing a bottle of soft drink. I've counted 5, Tayo replied. But people say there are more outside this town. Wale shook his head slowly, and she was not born with money. My mother says she used to hawk pepper on this same street, years ago. Tayo raised an eyebrow. So how did she become this wealthy? Wale shrugged. Nobody knows. She just became rich. Overnight, almost. That afternoon, the conversation ended there. Neither of them thought much of it. Rich people had their secrets. That was simply how life worked in Origbo. Tayo's days were filled with work. He moved from compound to compound, fixing generators, repairing fans, sometimes wiring a socket that had refused to work for years. In the evenings, he would pass by Bisi Falana's food stall at the corner of the street. Bisi sold rice and stew from a small table under an umbrella. She was quiet, hard-working, and always had a gentle smile whenever Tayo came around. You are coming late today, Bisi said one evening, dishing out a plate of rice for him. I had 3 houses to visit, Tayo replied, sitting on the bench beside her table. One generator refused to start. I had to open the whole engine. Bisi smiled. You and your generators. It is what feeds me, Tayo said, laughing lightly. They talked for a while, about small things, about the weather, about people in the neighborhood. It had become a routine between them. Neither of them called it anything special, but something quiet had begun growing there, the kind that neither of them wanted to rush. Life in Origbo moved like that. Slow, familiar, predictable. Until one evening, everything changed. It happened on a Thursday. Tayo had gone to a nearby town called Idasa to repair a large generator for a provision store. The job took longer than expected, and by the time he finished, the sky had already begun turning orange with the approaching evening. He packed his tools and began walking toward the main road to find a bike that would take him back to Origbo. As he walked, he passed a busy junction. Traders shouted prices. Buses honked. People moved in every direction. Tayo kept his eyes on the road ahead, tired from the day's work. Then something at the corner of his eye made him stop. An old-looking woman sat on the ground beside a shop, a small metal bowl in front of her. Her clothes were torn in places, faded from years of wear. Her head was wrapped in an old scarf. She looked weak, tired, the way people look when hunger has followed them for a long time. "Please, help me. God will bless you," she said in a shaky voice to passers-by. Some people dropped coins into her bowl. Some ignored her completely. Tayo almost walked past her too, but something about her voice made him pause. He turned back slowly. He looked at her face properly. His body went still. It was her, Madame Fedeke. For a moment, Tayo could not move. He blinked twice, thinking his eyes were playing tricks on him. But no, it was the same woman, the same landlady who collected rent from him every month without mercy, the same woman who owned 5 houses in Origbo and drove nowhere without a car and a driver. Sitting there, on the ground, begging strangers for coins. Tayo's heart began to beat fast. He stepped back behind a stand selling oranges, careful not to be seen. He watched her carefully. "Madam?" he whispered to himself. "Is that really you?" She continued speaking to people passing by, her voice weak and pleading. "Please, my children, help an old woman. I have not eaten today." A young man dropped a 50 naira note into her bowl. She thanked him with a bow of her head. A woman carrying a baby dropped some coins too. Madame Fedeke thanked her as well, her voice trembling with practiced weakness. Tayo stood there, hidden, watching everything. His mind raced. Why would a woman with 5 houses sit on the ground begging strangers for money? It did not make sense. Nothing about it made sense. He thought about walking over to greet her, but something inside him told him to wait, to watch, to understand first. So he stayed where he was, behind the orange stand, his tool bag heavy on his shoulder, his heart heavier still. The sun continued to sink lower. The crowd at the junction slowly began to thin out as evening approached. Madame Fedeke remained on the ground a little longer, collecting a few more coins here and there. Then, finally, she reached for her small bowl, counted the coins quickly with her fingers, and rose to her feet. Tayo expected her to walk weakly, the way a hungry old woman would. Instead, she stood up with surprising strength. She looked around carefully, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. Then she walked briskly toward a narrow alley beside the shops. Curiosity pulled at Tayo's chest. He followed her quietly, careful to stay a safe distance behind, ducking behind buildings and parked vehicles. At the end of the alley, a car was parked, the same black car that usually came to pick up Madame Fedeke. Ganyu stood beside it, waiting. Tayo watched from behind a wall as Madame Fedeke reached the car. Ganyu opened the boot. Inside was a bag. Madame Fedeke quickly untied her scarf, pulled off the torn wrapper she was wearing, and underneath it was a clean, expensive dress. She wiped her face with a cloth Ganyu handed her, and within a minute, she looked like an entirely different woman. Confident, wealthy, the Madame Fedeke everyone in Origbo knew. She got into the car without a single word to Ganyu. He shut the boot, walked around, and got into the driver's seat. The car drove off, disappearing down the road. Tayo remained standing there for a long time, unable to move. His mind was spinning with questions. Why would she disguise herself as a beggar? Why would a rich woman collect coins from strangers, only to change clothes and drive away in comfort minutes later? What was she really doing? That night, Tayo could not sleep. He lay on his narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything he had seen: the torn clothes, the bowl, the coins, the sudden change behind the car. The next morning, he went to find Wale. "You will not believe what I saw yesterday," Tayo said, as soon as he found his friend sitting outside his house. Wale looked up from the newspaper he was reading. "What happened?" Tayo sat down beside him and told him everything. The junction in Idasa, the old woman begging, the moment he recognized Madame Fideki's face, the alley, the car, the sudden transformation. Wale listened with his mouth slightly open. When Tayo finished, he stayed quiet for a moment. "Are you sure it was her?" Wale finally asked. "I am sure," Tayo said firmly. "I have seen that woman's face every month for 2 years when I pay rent. I know her face better than I know some of my relatives." Wale rubbed his chin slowly. "This is strange." "It is more than strange," Tayo said. "Why would she beg for money when she has 5 houses?" Wale shook his head. "Maybe it's just something she does for fun. Some rich people are strange like that." Tayo did not agree. Something about what he had seen did not feel like a joke or a strange hobby. The way she changed clothes so quickly, the way Ganyu waited for her without asking questions, it all felt planned, rehearsed, hidden on purpose. "I don't think it's a joke," Tayo said quietly. "I think there's something else going on." Wale looked at his friend carefully. "Tayo, listen to me. Whatever it is not our business. Old people have their secrets. If you start digging into another person's secret, especially someone like Madame Fideke, you might dig up something you cannot handle." Tayo said nothing, but inside, he knew he could not simply forget what he had seen. Later that evening, he went to BC's food stall as usual, but his mind was elsewhere. BC noticed immediately. "You are quiet today," she said, placing a plate of food in front of him. "I saw something strange yesterday," Tayo admitted. "What did you see?" He hesitated for a moment, then told her everything, just as he had told Wale. BC listened carefully, her expression changing from curiosity to concern. "That is very strange," she said slowly, once he finished. "Why would she do that?" "I don't know," Tayo said, "but I intend to find out." BC looked at him with worry in her eyes. "Tayo, please be careful. If she is hiding something, and you go looking for it, you might put yourself in danger." "I will be careful," Tayo promised. But even as he said it, something inside him had already made up its mind. He needed answers. Over the following days, Tayo began paying closer attention to Madame Fideke's movements. He noticed things he had never noticed before. The way she left the compound early on certain mornings, dressed simply, without her usual jewelry. The way Ganyu sometimes disappeared for hours in the evening, only to return looking tired and distant. The way strange visitors occasionally came to see her late at night, always leaving before sunrise. One of those visitors was an old man Tayo had never seen before. He wore a long, dark robe and beads around his neck and wrists. His eyes were sharp, unsettling. He always arrived quietly, and he always left the same way, as if he did not want to be noticed. Tayo asked around carefully, without raising suspicion. An elderly tenant named Iya Ojo, who had lived in the compound for many years, gave him a piece of information that made his skin crawl. "That man," Iya Ojo said one afternoon, when Tayo casually asked about the visitor, "is called Baba Sangodele. He is not an ordinary man."
"What do you mean, Ma?"
Tayo asked. Iya Ojo lowered her voice, glancing around before speaking. "People say he deals with powerful things, things that should not be touched carelessly." Tayo felt a chill move through his body. "Have you seen him before?" "Many times," Iya Ojo said. He has been coming to see Madame Fedeke for as long as I can remember living here. Do you know why? Tayo pressed gently. Aya Ojo shook her head slowly. Nobody knows exactly, but some of us have noticed something else. She paused, her eyes distant. Do you remember Baba Rasidi, the tailor who used to have a shop 2 streets from here? Tayo nodded slowly. He remembered the man vaguely, a cheerful tailor who used to greet everyone loudly. He gave Madame Fedeke some help years ago, back when she was still hawking pepper. Not long after that, his shop burned down. His business never recovered. He left this town a broken man. Tayo's chest tightened. What about the driver, Ganyu? Where did he come from? Iya Ojo shrugged. He appeared around the same time her wealth started growing. Nobody knows where she found him. Tayo sat quietly for a long moment, absorbing everything he had just heard. Slowly, disturbing pieces began fitting together in his mind, though the full picture still refused to appear clearly. That night, Tayo decided he would follow Ganyu the next time he disappeared. He needed to know where he went. He needed to know what was truly happening inside that compound. 2 days later, the opportunity came. It was a quiet Tuesday evening. Tayo had just finished dinner and was sitting outside his room when he noticed Ganyu stepping out of the main house, carrying a small black bag. He walked quickly, glancing over his shoulder, before heading toward the back gate of the compound, the one that led to the bush path behind the houses. Tayo's heart began to race. He grabbed a small torchlight, slipped on his rubber slippers, and followed him at a careful distance, staying low, staying quiet. The bush path was dark, lit only by moonlight filtering through the trees. Ganyu walked steadily, as if he had walked this same path many times before. Tayo followed behind, careful with every step, careful not to snap a twig or rustle a leaf too loudly. After nearly 15 minutes of walking, they reached a small clearing deep inside the bush. Tayo hid behind a large tree, his breath caught in his throat. In the middle of the clearing stood a small hut, dimly lit from inside by flickering firelight. Strange symbols were carved into the wooden posts outside. The air smelled of burnt herbs and something else, something Tayo could not name, something that made the hairs on his arms stand up. Ganyu walked toward the hut and knocked twice. The door opened. Baba Sangodele stood there, his dark robe glowing faintly under the firelight. "You brought it?" Baba Sangodele asked in a low voice. "Yes," Ganyu replied, handing over the small black bag. Baba Sangodele opened it slightly, glanced inside, and nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Tell your madam everything is in order." Tayo strained his ears, trying to hear more, but the wind carried most of their words away. He inched slightly closer, careful to remain hidden behind the thick tree trunk. Then, through a gap in the wooden wall of the hut, he saw something that froze the blood in his veins. Inside the hut, spread across a low table, were photographs. Ordinary photographs of ordinary people. Beside them lay small strands of hair, tied with thread. Beside those, folded pieces of clothing, and coins. Many coins. The same kind of coins Tayo had seen dropped into Madame Fedeke's begging bowl. Baba Sangodele moved toward the table, lifted one of the photographs, and began chanting softly under his breath, his voice low and rhythmic, almost musical, but filled with something dark beneath the melody. Tayo did not understand every word, but he understood enough to feel true fear settle into his bones. He needed to leave, immediately. But as he turned to step back quietly through the bush, his foot caught a fallen branch. It snapped loudly beneath his weight. Inside the hut, the chanting stopped abruptly. "Who is there?" Baba Sangodele's voice rang out sharply into the night. Tayo's heart slammed against his chest. He did not wait another second. He turned and ran, pushing through branches and leaves, ignoring the scratches on his arms, ignoring everything except the desperate need to get away. Behind him, he could hear Ganyu's voice shouting something into the darkness. followed by heavy footsteps crashing through the bush. Tayo ran faster than he had ever run in his life, his torchlight swinging wildly in his hand, his breath coming out in ragged gasps. He did not know what he had just discovered. He did not fully understand what he had seen. But one thing was certain in his heart as he ran through the darkness, branches tearing at his shirt, his slippers nearly falling off his feet. Whatever secret Madame Fadeke and Baba Sangodele were hiding inside that hut, it was far more dangerous than anything he could have imagined. And now, whether he wanted it or not, he had already stepped too close to it.
Hi guys, this is the voice of Sumi. If you have gotten this far, please don't forget to like, share and subscribe if you have enjoyed this story so far. Thank you so much. Now let's get back into the story.
Tayo did not stop running until he reached the edge of the bush path, where the trees gave way to the familiar lights of Balagoon Street. His chest heaved. His shirt was torn at the shoulder from a branch. His slippers were caked in mud. He pressed his back against the compound wall and listened. No footsteps followed him out of the bush. Whoever had chased him had either given up or simply did not want to be seen near the main road. He stood there for a long time, catching his breath, his mind replaying everything he had seen. The photographs, the hair, the coins, the chanting voice. He did not sleep that night. He sat on the edge of his bed with the door bolted, staring at the wall, turning the pieces over and over in his mind. Whatever Madame Fadeke was doing, it was connected to the coins she collected while begging. It was connected to the photographs on that table, but he still did not fully understand how or why. The next morning, he went straight to Wale. "I saw something last night," Tayo said, his voice shaking slightly. "Something worse than the begging." Wale, sensing the seriousness in his friend's tone, sat him down and listened without interrupting. Tayo described the hut, the symbols on the wooden posts, the photographs, the hair, the coins, the chanting voice, and finally, the moment he had been chased. When Tayo finished, Wale sat back, visibly shaken. "Tayo, this is no longer something small. You need to stop." "I cannot stop now," Tayo replied. "Not after what I saw." "You could have been caught," Wale said sharply. "Do you understand what people like that do to those who catch them?" Tayo lowered his eyes. He understood the danger, but something stronger than fear had already taken root inside him. A need to understand the full truth, no matter the cost. That evening, he visited Bisi as usual. She noticed the scratch marks on his arm immediately. "What happened to you?" she asked, alarmed. Tayo told her everything, the same way he had told Wale. Bisi's hands trembled slightly as she listened. "Tayo," she said quietly when he finished, "please, let this go. I am afraid for you." "I wish I could," Tayo said, "but there is something else I need to tell you." Bisi looked at him carefully. "Do you remember 2 months ago," Tayo said slowly, "when I gave money to an old woman by the roadside near the market? You were with me that day." Bisi's eyes widened slightly as the memory returned to her. "Yes, I remember. She was sitting outside the pharmacy. I have been thinking about her face," Tayo continued. "I could not place her then, but now I am certain. It was Madame Fadeke, in disguise, just like the woman I saw in Idasa." Bisi covered her mouth with her hand. "You gave her money?" "I did," Tayo said, his voice heavy. "And ever since that day, small things have been going wrong for me. My tools have been disappearing. 2 of my regular customers suddenly stopped calling me for repairs, without any explanation. Just last week, I fell sick for 3 days, for no clear reason. My hands have been shaking lately when I try to work on wiring, something that has never happened before." Bisi stared at him, fear creeping into her expression. "You think it is connected?" "I don't know for certain," Tayo admitted. "But after what I saw last night, the photographs, the hair, the coins, I cannot ignore the timing anymore. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of what Tayo was suggesting settled heavily between them. What do we do? Bissy finally asked. I need proof, Tayo said. Real proof. Something I can show people. Something that cannot be denied. How will you get that without being caught again? Tayo did not have an answer yet, but he knew he needed help, and there was one person inside that compound who might be able to give it to him. Ganyu. For days, Tayo watched Ganyu carefully, studying his movements, his expressions. He noticed something he had never paid attention to before. Ganyu rarely smiled. His eyes always carried a heaviness, the look of someone carrying a burden too large to speak about. One evening, Tayo found Ganyu alone, washing Madame Fadeke's car outside the compound. He approached slowly, careful with his words. Ganyu, he called gently. Ganyu looked up, his expression guarded immediately. Yes? Can we talk for a moment? About what? Tayo took a breath. About the hut in the bush. About Baba Sangodele. Ganyu's hands froze on the car door. For a long moment he said nothing. Then he glanced around nervously, checking if anyone was watching. You should not know about that, he said quietly, his voice trembling slightly. I already know, Tayo replied. I was there 2 nights ago. I saw everything. Ganyu's face went pale. You are the one who ran that night. Tayo nodded slowly. Ganyu set down the cloth in his hand and looked around again, more carefully this time. Come, he said finally, leading Tayo to a quiet corner behind the water tank, away from any windows. Please, Tayo said softly, once they were alone. Tell me the truth. What is happening? Ganeyu's shoulders sagged, as if a weight he had carried alone for years was finally being shared. I did not want this life, he began quietly. My mother owed Madame Fadeke money years ago. When she could not pay, Madame Fadeke offered me a job instead, to work off the debt. I did not know what the job truly involved until it was too late. What does it involve? Tayo asked. Ganyu lowered his voice even further. Madame Fadeke was not always wealthy. Years ago she was poor, just like everyone else on this street. She met Baba Sangodile when she was desperate, searching for a way out of poverty. He promised her wealth, but wealth like that always comes with a price. What price? Tayo pressed. She must feed him constantly, Ganyu said. Not just money, something deeper, something tied to people's lives. Tayo felt his stomach tighten. The begging. Ganyu nodded slowly. It is not about the coins themselves. It is about what those coins represent. Every person who gives her money out of pity, out of kindness, is unknowingly making an offering. Baba Sangodili uses that offering, along with something personal taken from each giver, a strand of hair, a piece of clothing, sometimes even their photograph secretly taken, to perform his rituals. To do what exactly? Tayo's voice was barely a whisper now. Ganyu's eyes met his, filled with something close to guilt. To transfer their destiny, their success, their fortune, piece by piece, taken from those who give freely, and given instead to Madame Fadeke. Tayo staggered back slightly, his mind reeling. That is why the tailor's shop burned down. That is why my tools keep disappearing. That is why customers stopped calling me. Ganyu nodded grimly. Every person she has ever collected from has suffered afterward. Some lose their businesses. Some lose their health. Some lose things they cannot even name, only feeling that something important inside them has quietly slipped away. Tayo's hands clenched into fists. How does she even get the hair, the photographs? People do not simply hand those things to a beggar. She has learned to be clever, Ganyu explained. Sometimes, a strand of hair falls naturally when people bend down to drop coins into her bowl, and she collects it after they leave. Sometimes, She asks for small favors, a handkerchief to wipe her tears, an old cloth to keep warm, anything people willingly give without suspicion. And sometimes, he paused, his voice dropping even lower. Baba Sangodele has other methods, quieter ones, that I do not fully understand myself. For a long moment, Tayo said nothing. The full weight of everything he had learned pressed down on him like a physical force. "Why are you telling me this?" he finally asked. Ganyu looked down at his hands. "Because I am tired," he said quietly. "I have watched too many people suffer because of what happens in that hut. I have wanted to speak for years, but I was afraid. Afraid of Baba Sangodele, afraid of what Madame Fadeke would do to my mother if I betrayed her secret." "Will you help me expose this?" Tayo asked directly. Ganyu hesitated for a long moment, fear visible in his eyes. Then, slowly, he nodded. "If it means ending this, yes, I will help you, but we must be very careful. If Baba Sangodele finds out before we are ready, he will not hesitate to use his powers against us directly." That night, Tayo, Wale, and Bisi gathered secretly inside Tayo's small room. The door bolted, the window covered. Ganyu joined them, still nervous, still glancing occasionally toward the door, as if expecting someone to burst in. "We need proof that cannot be denied," Tayo said. "Something visual, something people can see with their own eyes." "My phone has a camera," Bisi offered. "If we can record what happens inside that hut, people will have no choice but to believe us." "It is dangerous," Ganyu warned. "If Baba Sangodele senses a phone recording nearby, some say he can feel disturbances in his rituals." "We have no other option," Tayo said firmly. "Without proof, nobody will believe this story. They will think we are only trying to bring down a respected woman out of jealousy." They spent the following days planning carefully. Ganyu informed them of the exact days Madame Fadeke usually visited the hut personally, rather than simply sending items through him. Those visits, he explained, were the most important ones, the days when new offerings were formally presented and new rituals were performed. The next such visit was scheduled for 3 days later, on a night when the moon would be full, a night Baba Sangodele considered especially powerful for his work. On the appointed night, Tayo, Wale, and Bisi followed Ganyu quietly through the bush path, this time with a clear plan. Ganyu would enter as usual, carrying items from Madame Fadeke, while the others hid at a safe distance, with Bisi's phone recording discreetly from behind the thick trees surrounding the clearing. The hut glowed faintly under the moonlight, firelight flickering from within. Madame Fadeke herself stood outside, no longer disguised as a beggar, dressed simply but clearly herself, waiting as Baba Sangodele prepared something inside. "Bring it closer," Baba Sangodele's voice carried from inside. Madame Fadeke stepped into the hut, and through the gaps in the wooden walls, Bisi's phone quietly captured everything. The table covered in photographs, the strands of hair tied carefully with thread, the pieces of clothing folded beside small piles of coins. "This one," Baba Sangodele said, lifting a photograph and showing it to Madame Fadeke. "His fortune grows stronger every year. It will feed you well for several months." "And this?" Madame Fadeke asked, pointing to another photograph. Tayo's breath caught in his throat as the camera zoomed in slightly on the photograph Madame Fadeke was pointing at. It was his own face. "That one," Baba Sangodele said, examining it closely, "is beginning to notice things he should not notice. His fortune has already weakened significantly. If we continue, his mind may soon follow." Tayo's blood ran cold. Beside him, Bisi's hand trembled as she continued recording, careful not to let the phone shake too visibly. "Should we be worried?" Madame Fadeke asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "Do not worry," Baba Sangodele replied calmly. "By the time he understands anything fully, it will already be too late for him to stop it. Tayo felt anger rise inside him, hot and sharp, replacing the fear that had gripped him moments earlier. He looked at Wale and Bisi, then nodded firmly. They had enough. It was time to leave before anything went wrong. They retreated quietly through the bush, careful with every step, the recorded footage safely stored on Bisi's phone. Once they were far enough from the hut, Wale finally spoke, his voice shaking with anger. "She has your photograph. She has been targeting you directly." "I know," Tayo said grimly, "which means we cannot wait any longer. We need to expose this immediately." The following morning, Tayo called for a meeting with the community leader, Baba Isola, a respected elder known throughout Origbo for his fairness and wisdom. Tayo explained everything carefully, showing him the recorded footage on Bisi's phone. Baba Isola watched the video in complete silence, his expression growing darker with every passing second. When it ended, he sat back slowly, absorbing what he had just witnessed. "This is very serious," he said finally. "If this is true, many people in this town have been suffering silently, never understanding why their fortunes kept slipping away." "It is true, Baba," Ganyu said, stepping forward. "I have worked inside that house for years. I have seen everything with my own eyes." Baba Isola looked at each of them carefully, then made his decision. "We will call a town meeting immediately. Every affected family deserves to hear the truth, and Madame Fadeke deserves the chance to answer for what has been done in her name." That evening, the town hall filled quickly with worried faces. Word had spread fast through Origbo that something serious was about to be revealed. Madame Fadeke arrived, confused and visibly uneasy, unaware of exactly what awaited her. Baba Isola stood before the gathered crowd, his voice steady and firm. "We have called this meeting because a serious matter has come to light, one that concerns many families in this town." He nodded toward Tayo, who stepped forward with Bisi's phone in hand. The footage was played for the entire gathering, projected loudly enough for everyone to hear every word spoken inside that hut. Gasps rippled through the crowd as Baba Sangodele's voice echoed through the hall, discussing destinies, offerings, and fortunes stolen from unsuspecting givers. Madame Fadeki's face drained of color as the footage continued. When it finally ended, silence hung heavy over the hall. "Is this true?" Baba Isola asked her directly, his voice calm but firm. For a long moment, Madame Fadeki said nothing, her hands trembling in her lap. Then, slowly, tears began falling down her cheeks. "I was poor," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "I was desperate. Baba Sangodili promised me wealth, and I was too afraid to refuse once I understood what it truly required. I told myself it was only coins. I told myself it was nothing serious. But it grew beyond anything I could control." Voices erupted from the crowd, some in anger, some in tears, as several families realized their own struggles over the years had been connected to what they had just witnessed. The tailor whose shop had burned down years earlier stood up, his voice shaking with emotion. A woman near the back wept openly, recalling a business that had failed inexplicably not long after she had shown kindness to a struggling beggar on the road. "This cannot continue," Baba Isola declared firmly, once the crowd had settled slightly. "Madame Fadeke, you will lead us to that hut immediately. Whatever has been taken must be returned, if such a thing is possible. Under the watchful eyes of the community, and with local authorities now informed and present, Madame Fadeke led the way back through the bush path that same night, torches lighting the darkness as a large group followed. When they reached the hut, Baba Sangodele attempted to flee into the surrounding bush, but he was quickly caught by several strong young men from the community, including Wale himself, who refused to let him escape after everything they had uncovered. Inside the hut, the photographs, Strands of hair and personal items were gathered carefully under Baba Isola's instruction. Whatever mysterious methods Baba Sangodeli had used, the community elders insisted on destroying everything completely, burning each item in a small fire, while elderly women recited prayers over the flames. Whether it was the destruction of those items, or simply the relief of finally understanding the truth after years of confusion, something shifted afterward. Slowly, in the weeks that followed, several affected families began noticing small improvements. The tailor found new customers, returning to a shop he had reopened months earlier, without much success. A trader's stalled business suddenly picked up again. For Tayo, the change came gradually but unmistakably. His hands, which had trembled unexplainably for weeks, grew steady again. Old customers who had mysteriously stopped calling him began reaching out once more, some even apologizing for losing contact without a clear reason. Baba Sangodele was handed over to the authorities, along with Madame Fedeke, who did not resist arrest, seemingly relieved in some strange way that the burden she had carried for years had finally been lifted from her, even at the cost of everything she had built. Her houses were eventually placed under investigation, and in time, ownership questions arose regarding several of the properties she had acquired so mysteriously over the years. Ganyu, whose cooperation had been crucial in exposing the truth, was cleared of any wrongdoing, his mother's old debt formally forgiven by the community as a reward for his son's bravery. Months passed. Life in Origbo slowly returned to its familiar rhythm, though something had changed permanently beneath the surface. People had learned to be more careful, more aware, understanding that not every act of kindness was received the way it appeared. Tayo's business grew steadily stronger. Word had spread of his role in uncovering the truth, and though he never sought praise for it, people began trusting him with more work than ever before. One evening, as the sun began setting over Origbo, Tayo sat with Bisi outside her stall, sharing a quiet meal as they often did. "Do you ever think about everything that happened?" Bisi asked softly. "Every day," Tayo admitted. "I think about how close I came to losing everything, simply for showing a stranger kindness." Bisi reached over and took his hand gently. "But you did not lose everything. You gained something too." Tayo looked at her, a small smile forming on his face. "I did," he said quietly. "I gained clarity. I gained courage. And somewhere along the way, I think I gained you as well." Bisi laughed softly, her cheeks warming slightly. "You make it sound like a reward." "Maybe it is," Tayo said, taking a slow breath. "I have been thinking about something for a while now." Bisi looked at him curiously. "What is it?" Tayo reached into his pocket and brought out a small ring, simple but sincere, the kind bought carefully with savings from months of hard work. "Bisi, through everything, the fear, the danger, the uncertainty, you stayed beside me. You never once pulled away, even when things became frightening. I do not want to walk through life without you beside me anymore." Tears gathered in Bisi's eyes as she stared at the ring, then back at Tayo's face. "Are you asking me what I think you are asking me?" "Yes," Tayo said softly. "Will you marry me?" Bisi did not hesitate. "Yes," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Yes, Tayo." He slipped the ring gently onto her finger, and the two embraced quietly under the fading evening light, the noise of the street fading into the background around them. Months later, their wedding took place in Origbo, attended by friends, family, and many of the same neighbors who had once stood together that difficult night in the bush, uncovering a truth none of them had ever expected to face. Baba Isola, now regarded even more highly for the wisdom he had shown throughout the ordeal, offered a short blessing during the ceremony. Ganyu, now working honestly as a mechanic in town, stood proudly among the guests, finally free from the burden he had carried in silence for so long. As Tayo looked around the gathering that day, he thought back to the moment he had first seen Madame Fedeke sitting on the ground, begging strangers for coins. He thought about how easily he could have walked past without a second glance, the way so many others had done. But he had not walked past. And though it had led him through fear and danger, it had also led him, eventually, to truth, to justice, and to the woman now standing beside him as his wife. This story teaches us something important. Kindness should always come from the heart, but wisdom must walk beside it. Not everyone who appears weak is truly powerless, and not every act of pity is received the way it seems. Sometimes, the truth hides behind the very thing that looks most pitiful, and when it is finally uncovered, it takes courage, patience, and the support of good people around you to make things right again. Now, we would love to hear from you. What do you think about Tayo's decision to keep investigating, even after discovering how dangerous the truth really was? Would you have done the same thing in his position? Please share your thoughts in the comments section below. We truly enjoy reading what you have to say. Another gripping and emotional story is coming to this channel very soon, so make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you will be among the first to know when it is uploaded. If this story touched you in any way, please do not forget to like this video and share it with your friends and family so they can enjoy it too. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you again in the next story.